One quick note before we start. Every business name you'll see today has been changed. The data and the rankings are completely real, just not the names. At first glance, this looks like a simple story. This business runs 2 categories on its Google business profile. Some competitors beating it run even more, 4 or even 6. Add more categories, close the gap, and climb the rankings. That's what a lot of guides on this topic will tell you to do. But look closer. The business that's actually winning this whole market runs just 1 category. Already, something doesn't add up. Now, categories aren't something you can see by looking at a competitor's public listing. The primary category shows up under their name. Every secondary category after that is completely invisible unless you look at the code under the web page or use a browser extension. I built a tool that could actually see them and analyze them. 34 real electricians, real rankings, and data most people cannot easily access. Here's what it found. First test, does having more categories help you rank? I pulled every business in this market and counted their categories against their actual position. The business that owns the #1 spot in this entire market runs a single category, 1. Meanwhile, single category businesses show up everywhere in this data. Rank 1, rank 28, and everywhere in between. Count alone tells you nothing. So maybe it's not count, maybe it's relevance, how closely your categories actually match what you do. Here's a business running 4 categories: plumber, generator shop, hot water system supplier. Only one of these 4 is actually about electrical work, and it's sitting in the top 3 of this entire market. Now, to be fair, this business genuinely does plumbing too, so plumber isn't a random bolted-on category. But generator shop and hot water system supplier still aren't reviewed on topic, and it's still sitting in the top 3. If Google were penalizing irrelevant categories the way a lot of advice assumes, this business should be in trouble. It isn't. It's not just surviving, it's sitting in the top 3. But here's where the data got interesting. I found exactly 2 businesses in this market with 0 electrical categories of any kind, anywhere on their profile. 1 general contractor doing electrical adjacent work and 1 utility contractor. Those 2 businesses sit at the bottom of the entire market, 22nd and dead last out of 30. Everyone else, no matter how many categories, no matter how relevant, is somewhere in a range from 1st to 29th. That pattern lines up with a specific idea. Having the right category isn't a ranking factor you optimize. It's a gate. You're either in the building or you're not. Once you're in, the number of categories you're carrying barely seems to matter. There's one more piece of advice you'll hear constantly. Don't just pick the generic category. Pick something more specific. The taxonomy actually has options for that. So I checked whether anyone using a more specific option outranks the businesses using the plain generic category. Every single business in the top 12 of this market runs the plain generic electrician as their primary category. Not one of them got clever with a subtype. The one business that did try a more specific option in this market sits in the bottom 3rd. That's one data point, and it's worth saying that it doesn't prove specificity hurts you, but it completely fails to prove the advice everyone repeats. In this market, at least, nobody who's actually winning bothered to get specific or granular in their category selection. I wanted to know where some of this advice was even coming from, so I went looking, and what I found wasn't one bad source. It was an entire field of smart, well-meaning people who genuinely don't agree with each other. One Reddit thread said, add all 9 categories. Another said, maximum of 2. One well-known name in this space said, use every category you've got. Other answers, some of them very well written and confident sounding, warn that adding too many unrelated categories dilutes your relevance and drags down your ranking. Here's the thing. That dilution theory, the idea that unrelated categories actively hurt you, is the exact claim the business with the plumbing and generator categories already disproved, sitting in the top 3. It's not that these people are foolish, it's that almost none of them seem to have tested this against real ranking data. They're reasoning from experience and intuition, which is valuable, but it's not the same thing as testing it. I went and read through the actual threads, not just the summaries. Some had deleted spam comments sitting right next to the advice, and many of them disagree with each other on how many categories a business should even add. That's the material a lot of expert answers get built on. The real gate isn't a theory from a forum post. It's sitting in ranking data from 34 real businesses, and it says something more precise than any of that advice. Category presence is binary. Optimization past that point is close to irrelevant, at least in this market. Now, if you measure other markets, you might find something different. But still, After many years in the marketing game, I've learned that you should always take whatever any guru or expert says with a big grain of salt. Sure, it's good to read the opinions of others and test different ideas, but in the end, your own data and testing is what ultimately decides whether something is better or worse. So back to where we started. This business, everyone would tell you, needs more categories. Its primary is already correct. It's already through the gate. The 7-category gap I showed you at the start isn't even missed opportunities. It's mostly just noise. Not one of those categories is something the market's actual winners agree on either. If you're a contractor watching this and wondering whether your categories are holding you back, check one thing first. Not whether you have enough categories, but whether your primary category is actually the correct one. That's what will determine the vast majority of your success in terms of category optimization and ranking. Everything past that is, at best, a rounding error. One more thing worth being clear about. Everything I've shown you today is about categories specifically, the broad classification field. It's a different thing entirely from the services list on a profile, the specific offerings underneath those categories, things like panel upgrades or EV charger installs. I didn't test whether those individually help you rank for more specific searches. That's a real separate question, and it's worth its own investigation down the road. And one thing worth saying plainly, even though I haven't tested it here, is that dedicated services pages on your website are still a good idea, categories aside. Some of the businesses in this market don't even have a website at all. If there's a real demand for something specific you do, having a dedicated page for it is just good practice, not necessarily a bet on category rankings. So that's categories, tested against real rankings instead of assumed. Photos are next, and this one's going to use a vision model to actually look at what competitors are showing versus what you're showing, not just count what's on the page. So if you're interested, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.